Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is the superintendent of education for the San Ramon Valley Unified School District, and he took time out of his day and his insane week trying to make everything happen to come talk to me about the tens of thousands of people that he's really trying to keep happy. He has an enormous decision in front of him every single day as far as how to proceed. He has people telling him what needs to happen, and then he has people telling him why that thing can't happen. And I just so appreciate him taking the time to tell me and us as a community what's going on and how the decisions are being made. I appreciate his efforts more than anything. Without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Malloy. I'm willing to bet that when you took the job to come to Southern California, this is not the environment you thought you were coming to. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, actually, it's Northern California, not Southern
Oh
California.
my God, I meant sunny California.
Oh,
my goodness. You caught me on that. That's true.
Well, I kind of know what we're dealing with. I was in Toronto as the superintendent. We were dealing with COVID. I understood the complexity. And so actually, I realized we were going to have some pretty heavy lifting to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why? Why would you do that? It's kind of like looking at a boulder and somebody saying, hey, somebody's got to get that up that hill. And by the way, you don't live anywhere near that hill and you have no relationship to that boulder. And you raise your hand, you're like, oh, I'm the guy.
Well, that's a different question. I had finished 5 years in Toronto, which is a massive board, 250,000 kids, 600 schools in a big urban center. I'd been superintendent 5 years before that at another urban district just west of Toronto, and I knew it was time that I wanted to make a change. We have some personal connections in this area. This was a part of the states that we had wanted to consider moving to previously. I am American by birth, from Ohio originally, and so this was something that I had been thinking about over the last little while, and then some opportunities emerged here. I threw my hat into the ring, and the rest is history. So that's kind of how I landed here.
That's awesome. And you have, you have really put down roots here. Like you're not. It came to my attention a couple weeks ago that people were saying, well, Dr. Malloy is actually one of the first superintendents who actually purchased a house and really intended to be part of the community for a long time.
So one of the things, so yes, I have, my partner and I have purchased a house here. We want to connect to the community here. Trying to do this in a remote space is pretty challenging. With all the COVID stuff, having this whole stress that we're working through certainly adds another dimension. But many have asked me, well, why would you go from a big urban district to San Ramon Valley? What's that all about? And I reached a point where every experience I've had professionally, I've loved. But I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I want to be around kids in schools. I want to connect with our principals and our staff members. I want to know our parents. When you're the district of a 250,000 student community, you're very far away. So I was looking to come to a place where I could be more connected, be an educator again in the literal sense, where I'm in classrooms and in schools. And like I said, we have really close friends in the area that we wanted to connect with here, and that's how it all happened.
Well, you may want to rethink being so closely connected after we get through all of this. I appreciate that because there's something odd about anytime I tell people that I'm a tutor, and it didn't matter from when I was younger or older, everybody always has some opinion about like, oh, well, you should start a like larger tutoring company, get people working for you. And my answer is always very much the same. Look, I'm an educator. That's it. Like I'm not skilled at managing people, right? If somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, I don't understand. I don't know how you do that, right? Dealing with people that are supposed to do something, then for some reason don't. You're just like, what is happening? So I very much appreciate that. Being able to help people, that's especially young people, that's a big one.
And even when I was the superintendent of a big place, I still got out all the time to be in classrooms and to connect with everybody. But I'll give you a perfect example. I've already been to every one of our campuses. I've already met our administrators who are on those campuses personally. I'm able to go to all of their meetings where they're working out all of the different issues. I'm able to connect with parents. I had almost 300 parents in focus groups in November in groups of 10. just so that I could actually really learn. And you can't do all of that in a big place. But I also want to say that there were a couple of other things that drew me here. This is a district that does really well, but it was really made clear to me that they want to understand what doing better means, in terms of learning.
Yes.
This community really cares about their kids' mental health and well-being. And obviously this circumstance and this situation has added some challenge to that. But I'm a counselor by training. So before I was an administrator, I was actually a counselor, and I really wanted to lean into that. And the other thing that drew me is, even though lots of our kids do well, there's a small number that aren't doing so well. And what are those conditions that are making that happen? So the equity piece was also really spoken to me from the Board of Trustees. So all that to be said, I am still very happy to be here.
Right. Well, I hope we continue to have you be happy to be here. Your Herculean efforts to connect with individuals has blown me away, because you're doing those small groups or connecting with people individually. It's kind of like how many little meetings and how many individual parents and small groups it must be hundreds that you've talked to people, just unendingly answering the same questions and helping them understand where you're coming from, where you can make things wiggle and where you can't budge anything. I mean, how much time do you spend just trying to talk to people?
Well, I would say, Matt, that it's about 17 hours a day, and I'm not exaggerating. I don't mind working really hard, but I think that I'm looking forward to when we're through this pandemic situation and back to some normalcy. But when you're new, and you're coming to a community where you don't have connections and nobody really knows you, it adds a whole nother dimension to working through a crisis. And that I probably did underestimate, because I am somebody who listens. I try to engage. I try to respond to what I'm hearing. But what I learned pretty early on is that, people care, and we all care about our kids. And there's nothing more important, really.
Right.
And we're not able to do things the way we're supposed to be doing them. And everybody gets that. And our staff matters. And our families love our teachers and our staff members. I mean, I'm hearing that all the time. And our staff has so many different perspectives regarding how they feel. So what I learned was, depending on what we were working on of the reopening plan, whoever didn't align with that would get really upset and then want to be heard. And that's all very, very important. So that's why I've tried to the best of my ability to be as connected as I can. But I'll be honest, some people still wish I could be more connected, and I'm trying to figure that out too.
I have to tell you, I give you credit for attempting to be transparent and show people what's going on. There was you likely were not following it, but we had a politician running to be president, Mitt Romney, years back. Okay, and one of Mitt Romney's key points was that he was going to limit. He was like, look, instead of taking away this deduction or taking away that tax deduction, what we're going to do is just make a bucket, and you can fill the bucket with any deductions you want, but we're going to cap the bucket, right? And I was like, wait, what? And the whole point of that policy was, if I say I'm going to take away the home mortgage interest deduction, right, from taxes, these people are going to get really mad. Or if I say I'm going to take away, a child care deduction, or I'm going to take away this, all of the individual groups, he knew whichever one he took away, those people would rise up and get furious. So instead of taking the heat and trying to explain the situation, he just said, hey, I'm not taking away anybody's deduction. I'm just going to limit your overall deductions, even though everybody knew. We're like, well, wait, what if my bucket's already more than what you're allowing it to be? Well, you're going to have to take something away. So again, in my view, and I'm not saying Mitt Romney was a bad guy, I just found that it is a very interesting tactic to get a certain result without having to take any heat from any individual group. You have taken the exact opposite position, which is, hey, I'm going to be painfully honest with anyone who asks, right? Because I'm sure there are people listening to this saying, well, I didn't know, or I don't. Well, you are incredibly approachable. I do not know anybody who responds to more direct vitriol and junk on, say, like Facebook. I mean, the fact that you respond to people directly on Facebook, I'm like, oh my God, this guy has some guts. So again, anyone who genuinely asks and says, hey, how exactly are you going to iron this out? I haven't heard anyone say, he lied about this particular plan, right? Or he said the plan was this, and then we saw it in writing and it was something different.
Well, I think, as I reflect back on the last 6 months, there was a portion of this that happened before me. And that would have been in July when the decision was made to go to virtual or remote setting.
Yes.
And at that time, some of the families communicated to me that they wanted the district to actually ask parents, do you want to come back or don't you? And if that was organized in July, and truthfully, I wasn't here, but I agree with the board's decision because that was really early on for people to make a commitment for the rest of the school year. But then what that did was it challenged us because you don't change high school schedules in the middle of a semester.
Right.
And it then led us to that October period when we could have opened again. And at that time, when I realized all the different views and all the intensity of the views and all the diversity of the views, I thought, wow, we need a little bit of time to figure this out because there's some rules. We got to do negotiations with our unions. We got to do consultation with our community. So that we created that plan. And anybody who does project management knows that whenever you're doing change management work, you got to build a plan. So we were going to complete certain tasks in October, certain tasks in November, certain tasks in December to get to that January 5th date. And we got to every single part of that. Everything was done except for the actual opening on the 5th. And you know what? That's where people, I believe, some people think that I lied. And I certainly have heard that feedback. And all I can say to them is, I get why you're mad. I understand why you're angry and frustrated. I certainly didn't lie from my perspective because I had every intention to get to that place. But unfortunately, we don't have control over this thing and all the different aspects of it. But
so if I may ask then, since again, we're getting, I was going to ask you about something in July and August, but now we're in December. So let's stick on December. So you had this opening plan. Everybody agreed we're going back January 5th. And of course, there were people who were not comfortable with it, and you're always going to have some people that don't like it. Okay, fine. And there was, it's my understanding there was some communication with you in the early parts of December with union representatives when you were saying, look, we're going back. This is what the board has said we are going to do. And then the meeting in mid-December came around, and the board voted unanimously to not go back. Now, did you recommend that we go back in that meeting?
So what I can say is, if I can just back up a step.
Yeah, sure.
Every step of the way, since I got here on July 15th, started working on August 1st, every step of the way, I would say there have been challenges to work through. Because people in our community feel so strongly about what the right decision is. People have shared, families in particular, they want to be heard. And what I started to realize when I knew we could not meet all of these needs is that we just had to be more principled than pressured. What I mean by that is there's a lot of pressure, but what are the principles? So kids being safe, staff being safe, and doing our best to offer these two options. The board made a decision, two options. Not every district is holding two options, the remote and the in-person together. So all of that was the commitment, and we struggled through and did the very best we could, and we communicated often and dealt with social media and media and emails and all the rest. When we hit the 1st of December, there were a couple things that were happening. One, the post-Thanksgiving spike hit. And I was sitting one evening listening to the media speaking about, please don't travel, please don't celebrate the holiday, please don't even see another family or go to another house, but it's okay to be in school if you're already open. So that stuck with me.
And at that point, were we still officially already open or in opening stages?
Right.
We were still on track to go back January 5th.
This is before December 15th.
Okay,
so,
great.
so this would have been the early part of December, right after that Thanksgiving spike started being discussed. So we're in this new situation of a pandemic that was taking on more intensity. Secondly, even though we've said as a district that our families have choice, we've said from the beginning that our staff cannot have the same choice because we're a public service. And if a certain percentage of families want to go back, then we need that amount of staff to go back. And a lot of people wrote to say, well, won't it all work out where the staff that want to go back and the families that want to go back would all work out? And a wonderful principal of ours gave me a line that I have never forgotten. She's very excellent in math. And she said to me, when there are too many variables in the equation, you can't solve the equation. You can't give everybody choice and expect that on 36 campuses, we're going to have this all work out magically. So we never gave our staff the same choice. We did listen to them. We went through medical accommodation interviews, but we needed some of our staff back who didn't feel comfortable. Many do, but not all. So when the virus started to spike, many of our staff started writing, saying, please, not January 5th, not right after the holidays. So that was the second piece. The third piece was we were opened phase 1 and phase 2, October 27th and November 17th. We got permission from public health to do it.
And when was that?
So we opened in 2 phases, October 27th and November 17th.
Okay.
2 things.
And public health was saying, you're a go, you're green light.
We were a green light.
Great.
The interesting piece is, back in September, when we were asking the county and the state for the rules around reopening, they said that we just needed to have some programs open on campus and we'd be considered open. Mm-hmm. So we chose special education because for us, that's a large community of kids, probably our greatest needs. So 2 things happened there in December. And also, you might recall, Dr. Farnatano, our officer of health in Contra Costa, let us open on Tuesday the 17th, even though the county went back into purple on Monday the 16th of November. So there was a little bit of a special approval that was given. Long story short, we were questioned by CTA at the beginning of December regarding the legitimacy of our reopening plan. Mm-hmm. We didn't test it. It never went to court. There was no suit or anything like that. Subsequently, the state guidance that came out in January did confirm that we were not considered open by our special education programming, even though that wasn't a rule back in the early fall. So we were questioned. Staff did reach out to us, and the virus was spiking, and that's when I brought the recommendation forward to the board and said, January 5th is concerning. At that time, we only had the red-purple metric, which is why I also added the let's return in the red, because at least that was a metric that everybody understood. All the other metrics, until most recently, when we got new direction from the state, has been that. So, Matt, all of that was part of that really stressful time in December, and that's the recommendation, and kind of that's where we are at this point.
Gotcha. Okay, so thank you for that explanation. So a couple questions then. So it sounds like your recommendation to not go back in January 5th, even though we were on track to go back in January 5th. And I understand the state later on said, hey, had this been tested, it wouldn't have held up. But that wasn't the state in December, right? Nobody knew what was going to happen in January. So it sounds like your recommendation was based on primarily concern for the staff saying, hey, we're worried, and then reports that cases had increased but had not increased to the stage where the county said, hey, Dr. Malloy, you can't do this. So it wasn't something that you were being forced to do by the county or the state in that moment. it was primarily, hey, the staff doesn't really want to go back, or certain members of the staff are worried, because I don't want to say the staff in general, because I know there are plenty of wonderful people on both sides, people who are concerned for their health and people who are willing to put it on the line, and God bless all of them. Okay. But the idea was, hey, we are asking people to go back. They don't want to go back. We can, as far as we know right now, go back. There was nobody legally saying you're not allowed. And so it was the staff's essentially concern that persuaded you to say, let's not go back.
I want to be really clear that I don't want to say our staff doesn't want to go back.
No. Absolutely.
But the fear was something that, and the concern was something that I really wanted to pay attention to, because one of the things I've learned since I arrived in the San Ramon Valley, I am so grateful for this. I hear daily how much our families and our kids care about our staff, and how important our staff is to them. And I'm getting to know the quality that's here, and I'm understanding that. Personally, just so I can be right on the record, I have believed that if we are able to do all of the heavy lifting that we're expected to do, that I believe we should be in school for those who want it. Personally, I became concerned about January 5th. I became concerned because of what we were hearing post-Thanksgiving. So I want to be totally upfront that, yes, we have evidence that it's lower transmission rate in kids, and the kids don't transmit it, and all of these other pieces of evidence that exist. And really, I don't want to get into that today, because we could all find lots of articles to share.
Let's not do that, because that's down an ugly rabbit hole.
But I raise it because I'm just being honest that during that time, if we can remember that post-Thanksgiving period, we were basically asked to stop doing just about everything. That had an impact on me, coupled with the staff voice, and then coupled with the challenge. Because as we did our homework and looked deeply into the rules, we thought, might this be yet again another thing to divide us? But let me say something pretty clearly. What I do accept, and I want to say here, and I've said it to families directly, I understand that we've been trying to provide an option that meets everyone's needs, the hybrid and the remote. And I understand that those who want their kids back in school, they're the only part of our community that we've not been able to actually serve at all. And that's been part of how I'm working with the board now in response to the new requirements that we've received from the state this month, because I'm still, with our team, committed to getting there. It's time, it's necessary, we can do it safely. But I've got to take responsibility that I, too, grew very uncomfortable with January 5th, because if it was going to exceed what happened in Thanksgiving, my concern wasn't so much about kids being sick, but the hospital situation I was paying attention to, the spike in the community. And one last comment on that, Matt. You know, for a long time, our three communities, San Ramon, Danville, and Alamo, were way different than the county. You may recall that a couple of days before that December 15th decision, we were actually at or exceeding the county's cases. Again, not necessarily something that could harm kids, but it's something that was prevalent at that time. So those were some of the things that went into that December 15th decision.
Gotcha. And again, I want to be really clear. I have watched the communication, and I've seen the effort you put in. So I in no way am think the worst of you, as some people do or some people say they do. I think that's just silly. When you said initially, hey, look, people have said I'm lying or I'm this or I'm that I think the communication has been all along that, hey, look, we're going to follow the science and we're going to follow the board's recommendations, and we're going to push as hard as we can legally to get there. So when it sounds like that, it wasn't that, I understand there was a spike in cases, but if there was a significant enough spike, it's entirely possible that the county health officers could say, hey, you can't move forward. Like, they could tell us at any time, we're in the maroon I don't know. I don't know what the next color is, but the point is,
Yeah.
we're not even in the place anymore where you can open, because that's our health officer's job to determine this. But they weren't saying that. And again, I do not want to take anything away from the concern that the essential employees that our teachers may have. I understand that, and I've been meeting with students in person since July, and I have filters and temp checks and all of this stuff. I'm not saying that you could do that. I meet with very few students, so compared to you, that's not the situation. But it seems like that there was a disconnect there for some people when they were saying, "Hey, Dr. Malloy said that he would follow the science, that he would push as hard as he could legally to get schools back open." And then in the last phase, right in that December timeframe, there wasn't a viable legal challenge from people saying, "Hey, you're breaking the law." May have come out later that you would have been, but there was no viable legal challenge. There was no health officer telling you to stop, and there was a lot of concern from the staff, which sounds like really tipped the scale. So again, I am not proposing the idea that or the worst interpretation of your actions. But what I am saying is, I think that's probably where people see this. Hey, you lied to us. You said you were going to follow the science and you were going to do this, and then when it came down to it, it was the staff's concern for their safety that really tipped the scale.
I would say that that's still a part of it, because what I'm conscious of, there's a dynamic that I'm also trying to stay in front of, because it's worrisome that our staff is driving this in an inappropriate or an inaccurate way. I don't think it's that simple, because again, I do know that people have said that there are many essential workers that are back, and I also think that being in a classroom with kids indoors, even with the proper filtration and so forth, is something that is different than some of those jobs. Mm-hmm. Because when you're talking about 14 kids being with you for the entire time, and all the things that those 14 kids may do away from school, that's concerning.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes. Okay, and again, I have little kids. They'll like lick doorknobs and stuff. I mean, they're insane. But first off, I mean, if we're talking about essential workers seeing people that they have no idea what's going on, how about the checker at Safeway? Right? You're a lot closer to those people than 6 feet. You have no idea what the thousands of customers you see in your line alone daily are doing. And I don't think it has really been part of the dialogue in the medical and health field to say, well, we should plan on not knowing what people are doing and then be afraid of what we don't know. Right? So I've heard that comment too. You don't know what the 14-year-old's doing. Yes, but we don't say that about any other customer or client or service person. Right? We also don't know what our teachers are doing. And to say that all of the teachers and staff and everything are held up in bomb shelters, that's not accurate either.
So I think I'm trying to make a different point. There's a psychology, not just a science, in my experience around this pandemic. I told you I'm a counselor by training. We live in California. We live in Contra Costa. And what's going on in our state and in our community forms how people think about this. So when I hear about Florida, for example, I have friends who are superintendents in Florida. It's a different context. They think different.
Yeah, no kidding. Florida's different.
They think differently about all of this. I have connections in other parts of the country. They think differently about this. So part of what I'm saying here is I was able to navigate all of that, but there's a couple aspects, and I've said since the beginning, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist. And this is an emerging pandemic and it's an evolving one, and the guidance changes. And sometimes we have authority over some aspect of it, and other times we're just the messenger.
Right.
I mean, it took us 4 weeks, and I finally got Dr. Farnetano to come to a board meeting to explain why he had said that he told me it had to be 4 to 6 feet, because people thought I was creating the hybrid rule, because CDE, the California Department of Education, was saying this. And anyway, I won't go into that down that hole. But my point is, what strikes me as the person who's an educator and not a scientist is, when things change and the requirements change, what's it based on? So why was it okay for me to open up phase 1 and phase 2 and then have that questioned? And it was questioned in such a way that I thought, okay, this could be pretty problematic, only for it to be confirmed.
Confirmed later on, right.
Why didn't we know that in September? Because this is as blunt as I'm going to say it. If they told me in September I had to open first grade in order to be open, I'd have opened first grade. But that wasn't how it was discussed. And so when people said to me, you're going to stay open if you start, right? I was going with the best information I had at that time. And I'm not into making excuses. I was told that that was how it worked. But when we talk about December, I just need us to focus on the fact that when everything closed in July around schooling, well, I mean, actually closed sooner than that. It closed in March. But my point is,
Yes.
when it was made, when the decision was made and the state entered in that it wasn't okay to be back at school for the start of the school year, our numbers and our situation had exceeded that exponentially by the time we got to December. So all that I'm saying as someone in my seat who works with a board who makes the decisions, I recommend and they decide, is we were looking at all three things. And I know that some don't believe that. They think it might just be the staff piece, but it was all three components. And, you know, that's where I say, and I did say this week at a town hall, I said, I apologize for those who felt lied to, betrayed, and I mean it as sincerely as I can. This Wednesday at a town hall meeting, I did one for the staff and one for the parents. And I said, if you don't align with what you're hearing me say right now, could you please work with us to try to come out of the corners so that we can try to find some common ground, so we can provide a hybrid and an in-person opportunity safely, and we could do it without having this ping-pong match of fighting that frankly is not going to help our kids in the long run. Because what I do know is not all of our kids are doing okay in remote. And we got to figure this out. And we've got to play by the new rules. But what I said at the board meeting last week and the town hall this week is there's a new door. I'm a little nervous to say there's a new door because I don't know if something's going to change tomorrow.
Right.
But my commitment to the community is we're going to work to get through that new door.
Right. And again, something you said, first off, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it. I know that that's not an easy question, and again, it takes a lot of background, so thank you. One thing you said is the group of people that you have not been able to serve or lack the capacity to serve the most is the group of people that want to have some kind of in-person instruction. Do you feel that even for the people who have not asked to go back? Okay, so people who are saying, look, if you gave me an in-person option right now, however distasteful it may be or however sweet it may be, I would not elect to take it. Do you think that they're, from an education standpoint, being served? Because one of the things that is really coming to light is, for instance, the math data in the test scores, how people are all of a sudden theoretically doing better in math classes. When I find that exceedingly difficult to believe. I have some older students who are very adept at teaching themselves. You know, I talked to one of my previous students. He's now in college, and I said, "How's distance learning?" He said, "Well, I'm learning a lot, but I'm not doing it through lectures. He'll essentially look at the assignments, reteach himself. He's using a combination of online and friends. But when he does take the test, and the tester, no BS, he actually has to take them. He does well. He's getting A's. So there are some people that are capable of thriving, or at the very least learning. But even for the people who are saying, look, if you gave me an option to go back, I wouldn't take it. Do you think we're actually serving them from an educational standpoint, or do you think they're just not complaining about not having an option to show up?
So a couple things. First of all, I shared this at the town hall this week. We're going to bring the data to the board meeting next week. We made a mistake with the math data. So our kids aren't doing better in math. And I've apologized for that. Again, part of what's happening is we're just trying to move so quickly that unfortunately that was a mistake, and we've corrected that, and we're going to bring that forward on Tuesday.
Right.
What I can say,
if I may ask, and you know what, you probably don't want to share it with me right now. I was going to ask what the numbers are, but look,
so I can say thematically the numbers are just as challenging as the English data, the language data, which is more D's and F's than we've seen before. So it just kind of matches what was
Sure.
there on the English language arts side. What I can say is that there are three groups within our community, as I understand it. There are those who always wanted to be back in school regardless.
Sure.
There are those that definitely wanted, needed for personal family reasons, medical reasons to be remote. And then there was a group that really wanted to be back in school, but they don't appreciate the hybrid model. So there's kind of three, so they chose virtual because they
Sure.
don't like the hybrid model. And what's challenging is there are some of our kids with the way in which remote is being taught are doing really well. Really, really well. Everybody? No. So what started to happen, and I'm going to go to a topic that caused the group that wants to come back to be really frustrated, is the whole video conferencing idea. Why can't we just video conference and everybody who wants to stay home can stay home and everybody who wants to come to school can come to school and the teacher can just work it out with the video conferencing like some of the private schools are doing? Nothing wrong with that. But this is what we heard immediately from those who really love remote. And that was their choice. They then become a spectator in a classroom if that's their only experience. Because when you and I are close to each other on Zoom, we at least see each other's faces and so forth. When you're starting to have a situation where some kids are in front of you and some kids are on the screen, it can work. But it wouldn't necessarily be the same experience that those in remote were having previously. So I want to be absolutely clear. Some of our families feel exceptionally served by remote, and their kids are doing very well. And I do want to thank our staff because even if they struggled with it at the beginning, I think almost everybody was surprised at how much different it was from the March, April, May period. So that's that group.
If I may ask, what portion of students do you feel fall into that category of exceptionally being served, totally thriving, and would have felt like second-class citizens? Because I have people in here, I have classes in here where people Zoom in and say there are 2 people on Zoom and 2 people in class. Okay, all it takes is an old iPhone to set up an iPhone for, to see the teacher, and then one more old iPhone so you can see the people that are Zooming in, so you can physically see them and then pump their audio out of a silly Bluetooth speaker, and all of a sudden everybody sees the people at home, everybody sees the people in class, and you can answer questions and ask questions just like you were sitting down. So, like, how is it? I'm asking a lot of questions here.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them there, Matt.
I got a lot going on up here. So, first off, what portion of people feel that way? Because if you're telling me, hey, look, in a class of 10 people, 7 or 8 feel exceptionally served, that they're getting everything they need, they could run an education like this, K through 12, no problem. That makes sense. They're like, all right, well, we're not going to screw up everything for, the 2 kids, right? But if you're telling me there are only 2 or 3 kids out of 10 that, if given an option, would stay home, then it's kind of like, well, how is the 20 or 30%? How is the minority ruling over the majority?
So the problem with all of the data gathering is I can say anything on this in this conversation, and whoever has a different perspective will find something about it that they're concerned about, okay? So let me speak like an educator.
Sure.
Because that may be my science, if I can use that, or my art.
Mm-hmm.
When we started to work through how all of this was going to unfold, both the remote learning and then the hybrid learning, I learned a couple things as an educator new to this community. You may have heard the term asynchronous. It became a negative word because it was believed that it means unstructured. Kids without their teacher, no accountability. And as I started to hear that, I thought, let me explore this a little bit more, because one of the things that we also heard about is my kids are on the screen from 8:30 in the morning till 2:30, and then they're back on doing homework with classmates and such after. That's too much screen time. So one of the things as a teacher I always did is there's time that I need to be with the whole class. There's times when I need to be with the small group. Mm-hmm. There are times when I need to be with an individual, and there are times when my kids don't need me at all. And that when you're in a classroom, that's normal. So all of a sudden, we started to realize, because our staff felt that they were challenged regarding how March, April, and May went, we literally had some classrooms where the kids started at 8:30 and went all day. And that was never our agreement. Our agreement was about 60% of the time would be on screen and 40% of the time wouldn't be. Long story short, let me fast forward.
Take your time. We have time.
That experience of being on screen that way, in a remote space, with the teacher being that present, where the kids were all on the screens and such, and I realize we have to work through some issues around cameras being off and how difficult that is, and that's something we're going to look at in this new semester. But some kids really did like that. So when I started to drop, I did focus groups, I told you, with students, and I did focus groups with parents, and I started to drop this idea of video conferencing. What would you think about that? At that point in November, early November, it was 50-50. So once again, we were in a situation where, and then I started to hear from those who were really committed to virtual. Don't you dare take away my experience. It's working for my family. Why are you doing this to us? So I thought, okay, where is that sweet spot? I kept looking for the place where, again, I knew we weren't going to please everybody, but could we find a path? So the path was, let's ensure that any program you started in August, you would continue into semester 2. So if that meant a specialized class in high school, if that meant a special program in elementary school. And in those cases, we would most definitely video conference because we have kids at school and kids at home. For all other classes, we needed to get kids into their groups, who wants to come back and who doesn't. And we made those decisions. And then we said to the teachers, we trust you. You know the kids, you know when they need you. It wasn't going to necessarily be that there would be no contact in those asynchronous days. We just said we would leave it up to the teacher to provide what their kids needed. And just like remote, when people didn't think that it was going to work at all, I trusted that if we just could get into the hybrid, it actually might have met more of the needs than people thought. So, Matt, what I'm trying to say is, throughout this experience, people have been either satisfied or not, nervous, anxious or not, about the pandemic or about the learning, about their kids' well-being. But the one thing I can say is the group that has not gotten anything that they've asked for. And that's the part that I'm really trying to pay attention to. I have always paid attention to it, but I'm really trying to focus there in a way that doesn't take away from those who still need remote to be effective, that doesn't take away from the fact that our teachers and staff members do need to be safe and supported along with our kids. And I think this next doorway, the one that we just got from the governor and from the state, the CDPH, California Department of Public Health, as long as the rules don't change again, I'm hopeful that we can get through this next door.
Well, I think everybody would be excited about that. There seems to be this dynamic brewing in the community. I mean, anybody who talks to anyone, you find out people are in essentially two camps. It's like, virtual or in person. And one of the things that you said really stuck out, which is these families that have virtual, that want virtual, are saying, don't take this away from me, right? So it's kind of like possession is 9/10 of ownership. They have what they want, and they're holding on to it, and they're saying, don't take this away from me. And they say a lot of things to that end, and we don't have to go into them. But the people that have been stripped of the thing that they need most, in the people who want the in-person, and they just had it ripped out of their hands, they're fighting to get it back. And it seems like there's not really equity for the voices, because you have one group saying, don't you dare take this away from me, and then the other group saying, hey, we really want this, we really need this. And it seems like there's not really balance there as far as the weight of the voices.
So it's a little bit more complex, if I may.
I'd say it's a million times more complex.
So if you think about it as a continuum, let's just say 10, get my kid back months ago, this is wrong, this is harmful.
Sure.
One being, I've got personal circumstances, I've got family circumstances, all to be respected, that we need to be quite strict about how we proceed in this pandemic world. And then we've got people in between. There's the issue of, a stay-at-home order while we're going to school that's causing some people to question. There are people who have committed to coming back, who've written us to say, thank you for pausing. So it's not just group A and group B. There's groups in the middle that would like to see the numbers come down a little bit more, would like to see clarity around the state and public health's guidance. One of the reasons I was grateful for the public health guidance we received last week is because it threw out a new metric that we didn't have before, which was this 25 cases per 100,000 versus the red tier, which is 6 cases per 100,000. So immediately, I'm going to trust that.
Right.
That's CDPH. That's not somebody coming up with an opinion.
Right.
They're saying you can do this when we reach that. So, of course, I brought to the board that idea and explained why I felt this was the right door to go to, and they gave me the direction to continue to work to that.
Right.
And I shared with the community on Wednesday night through the town hall that I'm going to be bringing a recommendation forward that we get kids, TK, transitional kindergarten to 5, which is what the rules are, back as soon as we can after that 25 per 100,000 cases. Get our kids in special education programs back at that time. We're allowed to do that in small cohorts, all levels. We can't open secondary until the red tier under these new rules. But then what we're going to explore is how we can provide other on-campus activities using the cohort small group guidance. We're working on that, and I'm going to bring that on Tuesday. And then we're going to try to figure out how to do much more support to our kids for their well-being that isn't remote, because counseling through a computer may work for some, but as a counselor, it doesn't work for many. So, and that's not a comment about my psychologists who do great work.
So here, I don't think I asked quite right. And again, I get where you're coming from. Why are the two options? You said you're 1 and you're 10. Okay, the 10 being I want in person no matter what, and the 1 being there's no way I can go out of my house. I need a virtual option, and then a bunch of people in between. But it has been presented. Again, the thing you said, don't you dare take away this virtual experience from me. This is working for me. Why are these two things viewed as so mutually exclusive? Because nobody's saying the ones I can't leave my house, I have to stay in my house no matter what, or for whatever personal reason. It doesn't have to be, I don't mean to make it sound extreme or unreasonable. You have a lot of reasons why people wouldn't want to come out right now, and they're totally justified in having those. Those people seem to be saying, if you give this hybrid option, I get 0, I get nothing. And it doesn't seem that way. They're like, it's almost being presented that if we give a hybrid in-person option, then these people that do not want to be in person are somehow robbed, like in this ridiculous, exceptional way. Like they have 100% satisfaction right now, and they're going to go down to 1% satisfaction, right? When in reality, if you want virtual, I'm sure there's a way. And again, I'm not going to try to solve the problems of the world with you here, but I'm just trying to understand, why is it that it can't be that, hey, look, you're on a virtual experience right now. You're going to stay on a virtual experience. The person on the other side of the computer might look a little different, but you're still going to have this virtual experience. And the people who do have a satisfaction of 0 right now, the people who are saying, I want to be in person for at least something, no matter what, those people are experiencing a 0 degree of satisfaction right now. They could get bumped up to 80. They could get bumped up to maybe 90. They're like, look, just give me a day or two where I'm in person and I'll be happy. So again, why is it presented that they're mutually exclusive instead of, hey, virtual people, the people who want this exact experience, you're going to have to give a little bit, okay? And giving that little bit, you're not going to go in. You're still going to be on your computer. You're still going to be doing your distance learning. That little bit that you're going to give in experience is going to benefit the other portion of the population by an order of magnitude. And then we can all move more, effectively as a community, because that's one of the biggest things that's freaking me out. You have now purchased a house here. You live here. You're a community member. And for those of us who can't leave, like I can't leave, right? This is where I live. And for us, people like us who can't leave, we're going to be here after this pandemic is over. And if we keep going, in my opinion, with this all or nothing kind of framework where you either get all of the eggs or I get all of the eggs, but we're not splitting and giving, then we're going to end up with a completely destroyed community that neither you nor I will ever be able to repair because everybody will hate everybody.
So, we serve 30,000 kids. And I do agree that there is a portion of the community who's gone to the places that you've just described.
It's dark. Those people are dark, both ways, both sides.
But I'll just say, I follow it. I get the emails.
Right.
I watch on social media. I'm not judging it. I get that people care about their kids. They're worried about what's happening.
Both sides, by the way.
Exactly.
Both sides are worrying about their kids and their family.
Right. But when we talk about who's gone to those very significantly divided places, it's not, from my experience, the majority of our community.
So let's not focus on the dissolving of our community.
Right.
What is it about?
Right.
Hey, virtual people, you give a little, and the people who need to be back, they get a lot, and that way we can move together, saying, hey, you gave a little, it saved my life. We're all moving together.
Right. So that has been the strategy I've tried to use all along with this step that struggled in December. So let me be this clear. When I got here, there was already a lot of tension from previous months. And again, I'm not criticizing what I wasn't a part of. I was watching it from a distance. I was tuning in online just to see what was happening. We didn't know what was going on with this pandemic, issues around grading. Are we going back to school? Aren't we? How serious is this? And all the rest. And there were a lot of concerns. So I was listening to this, but then I realized, okay, the decision was made. We're going to be remote. And our teachers worked really hard at it. So if you go back to what was going on in September, October, when we had that 3-week window of the red tier, we didn't have clarity around direction. We had our parents in a couple of different places. Our teachers were looking at us and saying, we just figured out remote, and we're going to now try to make another change. Again, we could have. But my thought when I put that plan on the table the 1st of October was, all right, if everybody knows where we're headed, we're going to do this step by step. So I had in mind exactly what you were talking about. The common ground is everybody cares about their kids. The common ground is we got to keep everybody safe. The common ground is we may have to do that differently. Board, we got to provide 2 safe options. In order to do that, we got steps to take, and here are the steps. So what I am happy about, and when you compare us, and I'm not going to name them because people can find out themselves, if you compare us to other districts around us, we actually got to every step that we committed to do with the exception of the opening. And that's what's probably made this more disappointing, because you probably have heard, Matt, there are some districts around the counties near us that aren't even talking about opening.
Right. I have students that go to Los Lomas or that go to Northgate, and they say that they're not even discussing going back at all.
So we've been on this journey of we're going back. So I had at the foundation, let's not do the divisions. Let's not get pulled into the anger or the divisive or the frustrated. Let's just keep moving forward. But that was probably where I made my mistake, because I was probably too idealistic, that the emotions of the circumstances, the fears that some felt, the anger that some held, or the just concerns that people had wouldn't impact it along the way. But that was what we tried to do. And similarly, though I know that the December 15th decision made it look like part of the community got everything and another part got nothing, and I accept that feedback, as soon as we received the new information regarding what we could do, we were back at it again with another attempt. Now, my biggest stress, because I understand that we are in control of some of this at the San Ramon Valley Unified School District, and we are not in control of other aspects of this, is I'm trusting that this is a real door. You may have heard that the governor is still working with the assembly regarding its approval. I doubt that public health is going to change these requirements. So we're working collaboratively and collectively full speed ahead again, because our kids who need it have to be back at school. We can support our staff safely. I will say that I asked the community on Wednesday night. There were a good, well, at least 500 on one town hall and close to 500 on the other. And I just said, I know that this has been a hard road. I know you might not have been okay in the process. I know you maybe weren't heard and you felt that we turned our back on you if you wanted to go back to school. All I can say to you is, moving forward, this is what we can do. Can we find some common ground together? I will say that in the 6 or 7 months I've been here, this is the first time where the responses are giving me hope, because they are a little less judgmental, a little less critical. Doesn't mean we're not dealing with some angry people,
Right.
but there's a little bit more of, we got to figure out how to do this together so that we're all okay. I'm actually, Matt, hearing that explicitly. And I know, because I work closely with them, and our board will be dealing with this on Tuesday night, and you heard them last meeting, that they care about meeting their decision and commitment, which is 2 options. But I get it. The December thing and the challenges around it cause people not to trust us, and I accept that. I'm just continuing to keep working with the team to get to a better place.
In line with that, one of the things that I have heard people say is, hey, look, what does it even matter if we get to red? Okay, because like you're saying, there is a degree of, hey, we were told this was going to be the thing. We were going to follow the science. We were going to do these things and in strict accordance with what we were told to do, and we're going to move forward. And now some parents are saying, what does it even matter? We're waiting for something that's never going to come, because whatever, yes, I think it's totally fair to say guidelines change, but in the absence of guidelines changes, the distrust that I think you're kind of alluding to is this concern that, hey, Dr. Malloy is going to make his own personal call. Independent of what the county says, independent of what the state says, he's going to make his personal call for whatever reason. It could be concern for the staff, and it could be concern for the family. But that seems to be the thing that people keep saying, which is, why should we trust that even if we go to red, that all of a sudden we'll be back in? Because what happens if we get, we're in red and then somebody starts mumbling about a surge, and then he gets, communication from parents that don't want to open back up, and then, all of these things. That seems to be it, which is somebody at the top is going to call an audible, and we're not going to get a say in it. And the idea that we're going to be committed to the science and the data and the regulations as we see them today is not actually that commitment.
And that's a valid concern, and one that I certainly take to heart. If we could think about those first 2 weeks of December, and maybe in hindsight our board and I could have considered something different. I'm remembering the emotions, and it's not science maybe, but I'm remembering the emotions of how the communication came to us in those first 2 weeks of December regarding this pandemic. And I'm not somebody who gets all that alarmed unless I have the facts to be alarmed. And I'm just sharing my own personal experience of it. Those first 2 weeks of December, things changed for me.
Yeah, right.
I was feeling differently because, and I'm going to go to another challenging place, because I just got to put it out there, because you've asked me some great questions, and I want people to understand what's going on. Let me comment about the Del Amigo situation when we actually had an outbreak in one of our special education classes. And we were following the directions. And it was our circumstance that actually helped others, because public health tightened the directions afterwards. If you're dealing with students with special education needs, the small number of kids who cannot be in masks, it's very small, then the staff has to have medical grade protection, like you would in a hospital situation.
Sure.
We now have that. That wasn't what was requested. But Matt, the amount of people, thank goodness nobody was seriously hurt, permanently hurt. The amount of people that held us responsible for that sat with me. When everything started to get really intense after Thanksgiving, and we were talking about 10,000 kids going back, based upon the fact that we had opened up as we thought was allowed, but I started to wonder, why was that a good test that we had a couple hundred kids on campus when we were now going to bring 10,000? It was allowed. I personally started to question that, And I started to realize how responsible I and we are. And that had an impact. But the other part that had an impact was I wasn't sure how the state and the county was talking so harshly about our circumstances and not telling us that we had to stay closed or that we had to pause or what have you. I have to put that out there because the statement that has been quoted, and I gave it and I said it, is we're opening unless the county or the state said so. And they didn't. So it became my recommendation in the board's decision. I have said repeatedly since that experience that I will be way more precise in the way I speak, because I just logically thought we might have gotten a different response. But all of that to be said, what would change now? This is my commitment. And yet I understand that if I don't have control over something, I hope people will accept that I don't. But I do believe some of our kids have to be back. I do believe that our staff can be supported to be back. I believe that some of our staff want to be back and that we can do it well. And that's what we're going to do, assuming that the board makes that decision based upon my recommendation next Tuesday. So that's kind of where we're at. So, but I've said to people when they're really angry and they, make their anger pretty clear, that I get it. And I wish I had a better answer to that. But I'm hoping that by sharing some of my own personal experiences of being a leader in this space, that at least, even if people disagree, they understand that we think a lot about stuff. We read everything we can. I'm not exaggerating. I said it before, where it's a good 17 hours a day that we're trying to engage it. And we may make some mistakes along the way, but we get what we have to do.
I greatly appreciate you saying that, and I couldn't imagine the call. I couldn't imagine making the call, because even if you run the numbers, are like, what are the odds? What are the odds somebody, the worst comes to worst and somebody passes away from this? And I couldn't imagine the burden of making that decision. I mean, I have a very small classroom, and I have to think every day about kind of like, all right, do I want to keep offering an in-person option for people? Because that's a really serious responsibility. I've had some cases where a family member has gotten sick, an immediate family member from somebody in the class, and I have to, every time that happens, obviously alert everyone and everything, but it is a really serious call. And I think it is easy for a lot of people to say, well, make the call, make the right call. It's like, okay, the right call. And no matter what, the odds aren't zero, right? And when you're dealing with a large enough number of people, there's high risk that the worst could potentially happen. And I don't want to, that shouldn't be downplayed.
And let me give you another example, Matt, of what we manage. And this again is all a part of the education of something that's really complex. We, a number of months ago, put out a COVID-19 dashboard where on our website, anytime somebody has tested positive, we put the number up. We've been really clear, though, that if that person has tested positive, we send a letter out to the community that basically says you haven't been exposed. We call anybody that may have been exposed, working with public health. And for the most part, thankfully, we've had no issues with that at all. But even the putting the number up on the website has caused some in our community to be very, very nervous about that and concerned about that. Like, wait, oh my gosh, there's COVID on the campus. There's COVID on the campus. And what I've said to people is, well, number one, when we mask, when we distance, and when we sanitize, just because someone might be positive for COVID on the campus on a given day, and by the way, we also have to stay home when we're sick. I know that asymptomatic is a whole nother issue, but we all get that. Even the concern and fear that have been communicated to us about the fact that there might have been a person, even though we follow all the rules and all the rest. And so part of what I said last week at the board meeting and at the town halls this week, there will be cases when we open up. Like, there will be. And
It's kind of like getting a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to go down eventually.
there will be cases.
There's going to be something that's going to happen.
Right. But assuming the cases come from school is a very large jump. And again, we can learn from those communities that have gone before us, other states, other counties. And when we follow the rules rigidly, those exposures are known to be very low. But that takes us to the next point. We've got to be rigid about these rules when we go back. We can't be playing with this stuff because there are those who want their kids back in school, but they are concerned for good reasons about this virus. And we've got to follow everything that is required. And some of our families are worried that we might run into some difficulties that way about enforcing those guidelines. I don't think that's a problem. And I don't have a problem supporting our principals to make that happen. So,
Right. We can. I mean, you can send people home for not adhering to a dress code. You can enforce rules. This
Right.
is not that big of a
Right.
deal, right? Put your mask on or you go home. Put your shirt on or you
Right.
go home. That's pretty much it.
yeah. So I just want to say that because I think, again, there's the science of all this and there's the emotions and psychology around all of this, and none of it makes it wrong. It's just all a part of what we are working through. But just to be really clear, I think we're at a point now where we've been through a rough road. We have to get to a better one. I've asked the community to work with us as collaboratively as we can, realizing all of the feelings people have. The board, as I understand it, and I trust they will affirm this on Tuesday, wants to offer the two options. The state has given us some clarity around how to do that going forward. And this time, because I know you can't keep going to the finish line and not crossing, I want to do everything I and we can to get there. That's the part that I can say as clearly as I can. Honoring people's perspectives, supporting our staff. I don't mean to sound like I'm dancing, but we need everybody. We need everybody. You can't just say the heck with them. We really do need everybody. And maybe that's probably, if I'm honest with you as candidly as I can, the thing that keeps me up at night is trying to find that pathway to keep as many of us on the same page as possible. And maybe the challenge is that that's not going to happen. And there's going to be upset or angry people. And that's just life. But I'd like to get the majority of us on a good page.
Right. Right. You want to save as many as you can.
Yeah. Because, I mean, my thought is when I was thinking about December, and there were a portion of our teachers and our staff members who said they were really uptight about going back. I also know in the 6 months, 7 months I've been here, that because of that great relationship our staff has with our families, there was a whole other reaction that we'd be dealing with if we couldn't support our staff as well. So I guess I hope this message is coming through. We try to look at each component, each group, each person, and to try to figure this out. And we know that we haven't served, as I said, part of our community at all right now. And my team tries to hold one message every meeting. Okay, let's focus on the kids. There's a lot of intense reactions. Let's focus on the kids. What do we need? What do we need to do? And that's where we're saying, we're not trying to make any statement that remote is everything for everybody. Some people think we have. We want to thank our teachers for remaking school. We're recreating something we've never done before. That's what we're trying to say. But it isn't the greatest thing for everybody. So how do we honor our staff who's gone way beyond? How do we name the fact that it ain't working for everybody? How do we honor the different perspectives and keep people safe? December truly harmed people's faith in us, at least some people's faith in us. And my hope is that the next month we'll get to a better place with this pandemic. We'll get the doors open. And in the meantime, we're trying to get more groups onto campus. So that's the other thing that's happening as we speak. Because my last thought on this comment, Matt, and I'm sorry that this was too long of an answer.
Take your time.
Is we got to get more people comfortable with being back. Do you remember back in the summer when you'd come home from the grocery store and scrub everything?
Yeah, stripped.
Yeah.
We're washing oranges in
Yeah,
our garage and leaving them there for 5 days.
Right.
What about the strawberries?
I'm using this as a metaphor. Back then we were worried about surfaces way more than they are now. So we were on it, like everybody, the gloves, the washing, and all the rest. And people got accustomed to that for a while. And then people got accustomed to shifting that. And then now I don't hear people doing much of that at all. Similarly, I think that we just have to get into our classrooms. We have to show that it's safe. We have to follow all the requirements. And I think people will become accustomed. Similarly, like I've been going to the office since I got here, but none of us went to the office at the beginning. At first, it was a little weird being, is this okay? Like, how close can we be? So we got accustomed to being there safely. That's what I think is needed right now. We've got to get there for those who want it. We got to stay safe when we're there. And I think that we're going to grow in our ability to be okay there, just like schools and other places or private schools or what have you. That's my thought anyway.
Right. The emotional push to get there, and then you're there and people come and they go and we're safe. And,
Right.
and every day that goes by where people are safe, and even if there's an outbreak, it's contained, and
Right.
the evidence that there's actually transmission on school gets less and less. And it was like, look, we're okay, right? One big thing you're saying, we need everybody. One of the biggest concerns for the people in the community that rely on public school and have moved here for public school and either cannot afford or couldn't get a spot in private schools is, look, there was a big push for Prop 15, specifically from the union and other people who wanted to increase the amount of money that we could get to our schools. That did not pass. And Ann Katzberg was on doing an interview, and she said, we wrote the budget assuming Prop 15 should get passed. And if it doesn't get passed, that's going to be really bad. And it didn't. And now I understand that we have a fully funded budget for the next year or two, right? And we're not going to get deductions. But we do have people moving out every day. We do have children leaving the district and either going to private school, or whole families just leaving the area. And when we're saying, hey, look, we need everyone, I can't imagine that we're going to be able to function at the same level if we have even a 10 or 15% drop in enrollment. That's going to have to affect the budget by millions and millions of dollars. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, so our budget is directly connected to the number of students we serve. So that is absolutely correct. And yes, our state is basing the present budget on existing numbers as opposed to those that may be in our schools even now or next year. So they're basing it on numbers that in the San Ramon Valley are a little bit healthier. Also, there's dollars coming from different places. We don't always get a large share of those dollars because we're not necessarily serving kids who might
The
need
highest
them.
needs,
Yeah.
yes.
But there are dollars that are coming from other sources, and we're starting now to hear about some potential federal dollars and so forth. So all of that is in play right now. But I think the question that you're asking is, if we lose kids because people don't feel that we can serve them, what might that do to our schools? And that is a question, and it is a concern, and I want us to figure out a way not to lose our families. And I know I shared with you, Matt, before we came on, that I won't speak for anybody.
Of course.
But I can say that in my working with our board, both the previous board and now the new board, that they are very committed to this community and to our schools as well. And I want to just keep working with our parents on this issue. But this is where we talk about what's in our control and what's not. So I'm going to put an issue right out there. So we did this town hall this week. We generated questions from the community. And the biggest one is, well, what about the fall? Are you
No
opening?
kidding. Right.
Are you going to be normal? Well, I want us to be. I'm committed to be. I'll do everything I can. I'm sure the board agrees to be. But this is where the challenge becomes the issue. I don't know if something's going to change with the pandemic.
The
I,
sun could be red come August. We don't know if we'll be
don't
trapped in
know.
our house for because of fires. I
I
mean,
don't know.
obviously.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
And so I know why people are asking, because if it's not going to be what they need, then they're going to try to figure out another path. And then by figuring out another path, that could be less enrollment for the school district, and then we'd have to make some tough decisions. When I go there, I say to families, I wish I could give you something clearer. I promise you that as I learn things, I will share them. I am certainly hoping for and working towards a sense of normalcy. But what I do think will assist us is providing that remote opportunity as effectively as possible, getting kids back on campus who need to be on campus, coming together again around some of the things that I've been told are amazing about school communities in this area, how people rally to things, how they're connected, how they love being in their schools. We're not experiencing any of that right now. So my commitment is that we keep both options in play. We get to the second one. We're not even there yet. And then people's confidence in us grows if it's lacking, and that people choose not to leave the district because they appreciate what they've experienced. That's what I'm hoping for. But we're still in the middle of this.
Right.
So one of the things hopefully people are learning about me is I try to be clear, candid, upfront, direct, sometimes to a fault, because sometimes people might hear something. And I was at a meeting 2 weeks ago and I shared just what I did with you now. And all of a sudden, a whole social media thing says, Dr. Malloy says we're not opening in the fall. I didn't say that. I just told you I couldn't predict it. Anyway, I get it all. I just hope that people are hearing the clarity to the degree that I'm trying to share it.
I appreciate the attempt, even if they don't hear it. Here's a concern I have that I don't think has found representation anywhere. I'm really worried about Servia. Now, let me tell you why. So there is absolutely this overwhelming feeling in the community that the teachers, Servia obviously represents teachers and a lot of other people, right? I don't want to just say it's just the teachers union, but that the union has an extraordinary amount of power in what's going on. In fact, in the board meeting, one of the callers, calling parents from the community, was saying that they have an extraordinary amount of power because they can stop teachers from coming in, and that's the ultimate leverage that they can use to get whatever they want. When you say we need everyone, I firmly believe that our schools are strong and students have benefited from the existence of a teachers union. Because, and again, obviously not every decision. I know somebody's going to be out there saying something ridiculous, but I do think that everyone benefits when teachers as a whole have a collective voice, right? That's the nature of collective bargaining, and you get things like more counselors, and I'm sure Ann Katzberg could tell you at length all of the things that she has fought for and the ways students have benefited. And I believe her. I believe there has been enormous benefit for both parties, teachers and students. The way I think she put it is where the teacher's workspace is a student's learning space, right? So we get a lot of benefit when we benefit both. The issue is that there is this overwhelming sentiment that the union that represents the teachers now has control to a significant degree about whether we go back, and their feelings on going back or not supersede science. They supersede the board, or at least the very least can gravely persuade the board's decision. And that's leading people to leave our district because they don't trust that people that are well-intentioned, for instance, they don't trust, like Dr. Malloy may say this, but when the teachers union comes down on him, he's not going to do it. They'll say things like that. So they don't believe that the people running the district, or that are supposed to be running the district, actually are running the district, and that's driving them out. Plus we have dwindling population because, enrollment, and all of these things coming together, which is going to hammer onto the teachers union at the end of the day, because things are going to have to change. I mean, if we lose 10 to 20% of our enrollment, there are going to have to be significant cuts to the budget, which will be bad for everyone. So my question is, set me straight on this. To what degree does the union that represents the teachers have the final say or a majority say on whether we go back or not? It was one of the three reasons you said you decided to recommend not going back in December. You said, you heard from staff. The other reasons, obviously, you saw the surge and you were worried about if the worst were to happen. And again, I respect that, understand that. To what degree could the teachers, the union that represents the teachers, come in at some point, even say we hit red and we're getting ready to reopen? They're like, hey, here are 1,000 emails, 1,000 letters, people showing up at your door saying we can't go back. Would that be a deciding factor of yours? Or is it, to what degree is it a deciding factor? Let me say that.
Well, there's a lot in that question.
It's a lot there.
And yet I do know, because I shared with you, I did these town halls, and the tool we use, which not everybody loves, but I appreciate it, is it allows all the perspectives to come forward so we can understand what's most important to people. And when I was working with the staff, their concern was, well, why do people think this way about us? And when I was working with the parents, it's like, will the union drive all of this? And I want to start by saying that my own understanding of the role that unions play is that it's an important one. I've always worked closely with unions wherever I've been. Under legislation, they have some requirements that they need to follow. They represent their members, and there's a specific role that has to happen there. I do believe that their voice makes a difference and does need to be considered. And I just need to say to people that most people don't know me very well because, frankly, probably only the team that I work with every day has really gotten to know me because the rest have only seen me on a screen. But I
have a neighbor who moved in the middle of this. I don't even know his name. Yeah. He lives 4 houses up. Yeah. I'd love to say hi to him. I don't. Yes, so not everybody knows you.
Right. But I'm a pretty principled person to the point where some people don't always appreciate that. So my stance is always, if I'm going to make a difficult decision or if I'm going to bring a difficult recommendation forward, I'm going to provide the rationale for that. And some may agree with it and some may not. So in this particular case, leaning right into your question, there's some people in our community that believes, forget about door number 1, pandemic is spiking. Forget about door number 2, staff are concerned. This is all because you may have had a legal challenge. That's what people have written to me. And that isn't the case. But there was some concern that I had around what was happening at the state level regarding this whole concept of who's open and who's not. This wasn't just a San Ramon thing. This was going on all over. And if our community was paying attention to media in other places, these discussions were happening in a number of places. And some school districts that were open actually closed for a couple of weeks. They didn't even have to because of this whole surge thing. So I'm using that as an example to say the December situation was unique for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to step away from that, even though I know that that's the biggest concern people have. And I hope they're hearing why I'm going to step away and answer your question in a different way.
Yeah. And again, let me be really clear. I'm not trying to revisit the December. I think
right.
you answered that very clearly. Right. What I'm saying is I'm concerned about the sentiment for the union that represents the teachers in the community right now and moving forward.
Right.
Because it seems that people feel very strongly that the union is pulling much more of the strings than it should be as far as decisions and will be in the future. So for instance, I asked a couple people, hey, what if you could ask, what would be one thing that you would ask Dr. Malloy? And one of the things that somebody said is, okay, when we are in red tier, right, or whatever it's called, when we're in the red, will we for sure be going back? Or will the teachers union just make the call, have a mass communication, and, kind of saturate him with don't send us back, you're going to kill us kind of horrible stuff, and we'll get shut down again, or we won't even move forward? That seems to be the concern, and that type of sentiment, which is the union is in control, is turning people against the union, which is ultimately going to be horrible for the union and potentially the community, because the community has benefited from the existence of a union.
Right. So the only reason I stepped back into December is because I think this concern is propelled by what happened there.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's the only reason I went there. And I want to step back from that. First of all, I do understand that a portion of our community feels that way. Mm-hmm. I also understand that a portion of our community does not.
Yes.
Secondly, I also understand that as the superintendent, I also want to work closely with our staff and with our union colleagues, because we've got to be a united front as best as possible. That's a commitment of mine. Thirdly, leaning in and listening to people's perspectives is important to me, but then I have to make principled decisions. Where I am committed is this. If we are allowed under state guidance to open in terms of the red tier for secondary, or in terms of 25 cases per 100,000 for elementary.
Or whatever it is, because that could change tomorrow. But if the state is saying we can open in whatever way or metric they decide.
Yeah, this is where I think I can answer the question clearly. The union, under the law, has some rights and responsibilities that I must and will engage. When they negotiate, how they engage us, and yes, there are tools at their disposal that they can grieve, they can cease and desist, they can do all of those things. There is a legal process that can be followed under legislation whenever there might be a conflict. Mm-hmm. Conflict alone doesn't drive me. Do I like it? No. Would I prefer that we come to consensus? Absolutely. But when there is a conflict, when there isn't agreement, then there's a process for that to follow. And what I can say concretely is that when I do my due diligence, when I collaborate widely, when I listen to many different voices, including our union colleagues, our parent voices, staff members, community members, I make a decision. I check with legal if that's required. I'll check with public health if it has something to do with this pandemic. I've never worked with public health more in my entire 30-year career till now. But once that decision is made, I'll stand for that. So that's the commitment I can make. Whether that decision will be challenged, whether there's some other reality that could come at us based upon that decision, something legal, something otherwise, I can't predict. But what this experience has taught me is that I have to be sure, to answer your question, what the ramifications are if there is a conflict. So, explicitly, I understand our board makes a decision. It is our responsibility to negotiate any of the working conditions around that decision. Unless there are legal realities that stop that decision, if I'm being very legal, the employer can say, be at work.
Right.
But we all know that education is a human business. We're a community of people, and right now we're struggling for good reason. If all we did was that strategy, there'd be other reasons for people not wanting to be in this district, because we won't be even remotely cohesive. So my job is to constantly balance that. And right now, some believe that that is out of balance. I accept that feedback. But I'm not going to just react to it. I'm still going to be doing exactly what I just said. Listening, engaging, learning, deciding, recommending to the board, because then they approve, and following through. That's the best I can offer, but I don't want people to think that I'm unduly influenced by anybody, including people who try to influence me who aren't union people. Matt, you probably aren't surprised that I'm not exaggerating when I say that I get usually between 200 and 250 emails a day. And most of the time it's an attempt, very valid attempt, to influence me. And I'm grateful for the feedback. And when I say, and if there's anyone listening, when I say to you, thank you for your feedback, I really appreciate it, please don't think that that's someone else answering it. I'm reading it, I'm answering it, I may not be agreeing with it. But what I'm going to do, even I hope more effectively than the past, is be clearer about what the principles are behind the decision and accept that some people may not be able to hear that. But that's the lesson I've taken being the new community member and the new superintendent, because as I shared, at the beginning, I mean, I'm not a new superintendent. I'm new here.
Right.
And though the complexities were different, 600 schools and 250,000 kids had their own set of challenges. I'm good with challenge, and I'm willing, ready, and able to make hard decisions. And I hope we can do it in a way that keeps our community cohesive. But in terms of the union piece, I'm committed to working with them. I'm committed to being honest with them, but I'm not interested, nor do I think it is happening, that I'm being unduly coerced by them.
Understood. And again, a very complex relationship. And the point you made of, hey, if we did just say in a very employer-employee fashion, show up to work, that's it, we might not have the school district and the relationship and the community that we have always enjoyed, right, and we obviously had before COVID, and we're hoping to have some semblance of afterwards.
And relationships, to me, are paramount, right underneath principles. And as people are listening, I have to always think about how to communicate in a way that captures and resonates with all of our stakeholders' experiences. So as I was answering that question, I'm just going to tell you what was going through my mind. Is there an amazing 4th grade teacher or a great 10th grade math teacher that's feeling right now that I threw them under the bus? Because I don't want to throw them under the bus. But what I'm trying to say is, if this opportunity allows anyone to get to know me better, please know that that's what I and the team and my working with the board, that's what we do. We sit in the middle of all this complex stuff and we try to figure it out. But I will say this, because I'm principled, if I have to fight, I will.
Right.
Would I love to? No. Would it be my last resort? Yes. But if I have to, I will. Whoever it is. I'm not talking about any one stakeholder. Fighting means simply standing up and saying no. Fighting doesn't mean doing something unprofessional, inappropriate, or
sure,
ridiculous.
Last one here. This is an ungodly, unfair question for you.
Now I'm nervous.
Don't be. It's actually kind of just a yes or no. So here's the situation. Months from now, sometime in the future, the county and state, from whatever wisdom they deem appropriate, have said, we can go back. And a portion of the community wants to go back. A portion of the community does not want to go back. And again, you could just do yes or no or explain, I don't mind. You will not necessarily you will not necessarily blindly push forward, even if the county and state and whatever other governing bodies say we can move forward and open. You will not necessarily move forward just based on that. You will take, say, the staff's requests and everything else into consideration. It will not be a, hey, take it to the bank. The second we can go back, I will go back based on the science and the regulation. That is not your position.
Actually, let me be clear. If the state and the county ever communicated that clearly to us about this pandemic situation, I'd be grateful, because the answer is absolutely yes. It's not blind. We're doing it. Because I will trust that the experts that they're working with will have taught us exactly what we need to do. The clarity around that type of direction, I've only been here a short time. I'm not being disrespectful. That clarity does not exist right now. Because once we're given that type of clarity, then there are all kinds of other conditions we need to fulfill in order to get to the next place. So let me be clear with you, Matt. Absolutely, we're going back. Secondly, I believe personally, and I shared this with the team, the staff on Wednesday, the parents, just so that we kind of end this conversation with everybody knowing exactly where I stand. In September, when we talked about what we were going to do in October, I felt we could go back safely. I knew we had mountains to climb, and you don't move people that quickly when you're the new superintendent with no relationships by saying, we're doing this in 2 weeks. It doesn't work like that. So I knew that I needed time, and the board gave us that time. But I thought we could be safe in October. I didn't think we would be safe for a little while on January 5th. That's me talking. I do believe we can be safe soon. And that is my commitment. That is me personally sharing my commitment. Remote, hybrid. I want to get kids back to school face to face as soon as the distancing thing is relaxed. And I want to get as many kids safely on campus in this in-between time. And I want to figure out things like graduation and end of year activities with our parents and our kids now. Not in April, now. And we've asked our principals to start those discussions. I just ask that our community understands the complexity while we're trying to do the best work we can, helps us stay connected and as unified as possible. And I will accept responsibility for a part of our community not being heard. And we'll do what we can not to make another part feel ignored, but to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And it's got to be about our kids, and they need a lot right now. And not everybody's getting what they need. And the only way I know how to deal with that is great teachers, great staff members, working with administrators and parents at school level in classrooms, knowing those kids, knowing who they are, knowing what they need. And we got to figure that out, because if we don't, it's not just about getting kids back to school. That's one thing. But there's a lot more going on, in my experience, than just that. So that's my commitment. That's my goal. And I hope I've been able to share it in a way that people can at least try to hear if they're struggling to.
Well, first, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for doing everything you can to put your best foot forward, to get everybody together, to organize, to motivate, inspire, and instill confidence that we'll get there. We'll get there, because man, our kids need us to get there.
Absolutely.
It's real bad. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.